So I always think that if you want to make an economy, you have to have some kind of flow of movement of money and goods. Essentially, that just means people have to buy stuff and people have to sell stuff. And of course, you need some kind of currency, whether it be barter or an actual currency. Nowadays, if you want, just say, a cryptocurrency or a virtual currency to take off and to have some kind of use, you have to use it. You have to find a way to use it. The same way that most of us are just using the standard currencies of our country, or the USD, because it is used, so to speak. That's what's accepted. But if you accepted something else, then, well, that currency would start to take more root. Piracy is something I think we have to be careful about. I think you can pirate something to try it out and to see if you actually want it, almost as like a trial, if there isn't a trial available. Or just say if you can't buy that thing anymore, if it just doesn't exist, it's just not purchasable, or the person who made it and the company and all that is gone bust. But I think if you actually like something, be it a book or a game or whatever, it's good to support the person who made it, because of course ultimately money is what gets us through in society. It gets us through the day. It lets us purchase food, goods, and pay our bills and such, which lets people live in society. I think it's a good thing if the economy shifts in a more digital way, because of course, as time goes on, it becomes easier and easier to satisfy the lower regions of, for example, processing mass amounts of food to feed people, or mass amounts of clothing, and assumably it would houses as well, but that's a tricky issue, which I won't go into in this video. But basically the idea is, as time goes on, living should become easier. Satisfying the root of survival should become easier. Of course, there are still storms, things like inflation and recession, which we are currently experiencing, which do shake things up a little, but we can do the best we can do in these rough situations. And I think getting back to the piracy thing, I think we have to realize that through our money we are creating and influencing the future. If you support creators that you like, people who make things that you like, I like games. It's interesting to me. So if I see a game that I like, I will support that creator financially through buying it, to show that there is interest in that, and and it gains more traction in the cyberspace world through various algorithms and such, getting more attention. I see that as a way to lead the future, as in, I want more of that whatever that might be. So that's how you get more of it, essentially. It's one way, at least. Of course, we all have complicated lives to some extent. If you think about it, if everyone stopped buying a certain thing, that company would fail. You would assume so. Of course, if the company is a very mainstream one, it might get bailed out by another company or by a government. But again, it would deal a blow. So of course, we have power financially. And if you don't like something, then stop buying it. Stop buying whatever company's good it is. Or stop using whatever currency. As we can see, Russia's going on to the gold standard. I think that's a smart move. Of course, I'll leave that currency talk for another video, and I'll just leave it with this. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Of course, feel free to check the links in the description, and have a nice day. So I learnt a new word a little while ago called gentrification. And generally, it's like an American word, I think. Generally in America, what would happen is that you've got these lower income ghetto black neighborhoods. And then what happens is you've got rich people who move in, right? And then eventually they have there's more rich businesses that move in because they want to cater to these people. So maybe like a rich clothing shop or a rich food, like a whole food shop, something like that. And eventually what happens is the neighborhood starts getting kind of cleaned up a little bit, and the property prices rise through the roof because you've got more rich people who want to live there, and you've also got the people who have, who own the apartments and houses. They're like, okay, they're going to pay a little more to live here, or they can pay a little more. What happens eventually is the original residents cannot pay to live there because they don't earn that much money. They're low income, they're low IQ. They simply, because again, lower class people, lower class IQ, usually they're mentally ill to some extent. Their houses are messy and dirty, and they themselves are, kind of inferior beings, so to speak, who have to cultivate themselves to get higher. So they kind of get knocked down. They're either on the streets or they have to move to another low-income area. That's the basic idea of gentrification. And I've realized that it's actually been happening where I live. Now, I don't live at the town area, the local city-ish area. And it's not the main city for the state. I live near because there's lots of cities, so to speak, which are like where all of the suburban or the outer city regions combine. And then it combines to like a major city. So anyway, I don't live near the minor city area, but I work near there sometimes. And what I noticed around the minor city is that for years, probably like 20 years, 15-ish years now, they've been really heavily investing in it. Because it's near the ocean, right? So it's a big kind of, it's popular, I guess, in that way, or they can make it look fancy. Anywhere near the ocean, you can make it look fancy. But it was a very poor, very shit area. Drug addicts, crime. It's not a pretty area, and still, even though they've fixed it up and cleaned it up and invested millions of dollars, I would imagine, into this area, they've got hotels and all this, and all fast food and fancy shops and all this kind of crap. You still have the people who live there, the old people. You can still see them, the people affected by whatever drugs they're on, that look like literal gremlins. Just these absolute disgusting looking people. They're gremlin like. You can still see they exist there, but you've got an influx of a huge amount of Asian people. Usually it's Asians because they are the ones who can afford to live there. So if we break down the Asians, we've got two major classes of Asians. The first one are like the master Asians, which are the Chinese. Now the Chinese, the rich Chinese from their country, it's not poor Chinese coming over, because there's lots of poor Chinese. There's lots of lower IQ, uneducated, poor Chinese. But the rich, high IQ, educated ones are coming over and they're buying property. And the thing is, they are the only ones really who have the money to buy property in Australia now. That's what I'm starting to notice. And here's the thing. I don't hate the Chinese. I don't hate the Asians. I actually like the Asians because they're more respectful and they're smarter. And they just seem like nicer people, I guess, than the Australians. Australians are I think they're low IQ, they're emotionally unstable. it's like a 90 or an 80% split, where like 80% of Australians are just rotten to the core, and then you got like 20% that are like really nice and actually good people, or maybe it's 10% and 90%. I don't know. It seems that way sometimes. And there's like no in between. Either you just like, well, there is an in between. All right, I'll give it that way. There's kind of like a working class in between, or like yeah, something like that. But yeah. So that's why I see it like the Chinese are fundamentally they're just better, and that's why I'm torn. My nationalism is torn with my seeing reality for what it is. Right, so then you've got the second class of Asians, which are more the worker class, which is the Indian area, the Indian, the Pakistan, the Sri Lankan, etc., around that area of India. Now, as well, the same way with the Chinese, the higher IQ, the more educated, the more richer Indians are coming over, because again, there's a billion poor Indians, I'll put it that way. There's a billion Indians that are living in, well, there's not a billion, but there's a lot of Indians living in, lower conditions that don't really have the money to fly over to, another country. So when you are seeing an Asian immigrant, they're probably pretty well off in their own country. That's one thing you got to realize. So anyway, these Indians don't particularly have the money because they're not as rich and they're not as probably, I guess, intelligent as the Chinese to get an overpriced house here. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But they work. These people are working 12 plus 14 hours a day. They're working on their phones, like talking while they're doing some kind of driving work. They're working while they're, taking the transport or whatever. They're always working. And it's gotten to a point where employees will only really want to hire Indian or various forms of Asian people for their work. The Chinese make their own businesses, and they usually work in Chinese areas. You don't really see a Chinese person working for another person. I've actually never seen it now that I think about it. Not even even the children of the Chinese, which are a little bit westernized, are not. They're working for their parents because their parents own a noodle shop or a chicken shop or something or other. Otherwise, maybe they're working as a doctor. I think I've only seen them actually. I think I've seen like one or two working as a doctor. So higher positions. That's for the children, because the children are a bit more westernized. They're a bit more integrated into the culture, assuming they don't go back. You do, of course, have the Chinese students, which pretty much only know Mandarin. They don't know English, and then they go back. Going back with the Indians usually live together, as in they have a family, or they live with their brothers or sisters, or they live together. They have, a lot of people in one house, basically, because they can't afford it any other way. So they're all living in there in one house, right? Well, the Chinese can buy multiple properties usually. They're the ones who can buy a lot of this stuff. Now, what's happened because of all of this is that firstly, because of all and again, I do not blame the Indians. Yes, they got to realize there's a lot of fucking Indians. Like there's a billion Indians, there's a billion Chinese. If they wanted to, there's 27 million Australians now apparently. Probably false statistics or whatever. They could send 27 million Chinese and 27 million Indians, and this place would become, it already pretty much is Little India. It feels like it, to be honest. It would become, literally like just an extension of India. Like that could happen. That's how delicate this is. And the same could happen with most, small European countries under maybe 10 million to 20 to 30 million residents. You've got to realize the scale of people in relation to another country. Anyway, going on. So I don't hate the Indians, I don't hate the Chinese. If anything, I actually like them. I like the Asian people. Asian people seem to be good people. Chinese are a little bit greedy as fuck. So you got to be careful. They're trying to hustle. They hustle you in. It's not not in polite way, but it is a little bit of a, money grabbing way that they sometimes can hustle you. You've got to be careful. Well, Indians can be a bit, they're mercurial, so they can be kind of antisocial and stranger some of the time. I'm mercurial as well, so I fit in really well with them. So I really don't have the problem. Or you have the problem of like the angry kind of Indian. You don't get many of them. It's a very small percentage that are very angry, but you got to be careful of the angry ones. Most of them are very polite, if you show them kindness, they'll show you kindness back. But I'll keep explaining how this works. So you've got a lot of Indians coming over, taking the jobs. So the people who are kind of lower and middle class are struggling to get jobs, right? It's only really the upper class that are still having jobs because they have their own businesses, or they're very rich, or something else, they've got a lot of money. And then it's the Chinese who are taking the houses, especially in, as I said, the place where I live. Nearby the place where I live, there is a lot of Chinese coming in. And again, it's, as I said, I'm at odds because, Chinese women are very beautiful, I think. I think Asian women are, some of the prettiest next to, white European descent women. It's personal preferences. And also they're very polite and they run good businesses and all that. So I'm at odds with the nationalism side, which is if you want a functional, proper country, you have to be nationalistic. You can't just import a shitload of immigrants. It ruins the balance, as we've seen with the property and the job market with the Indian and the Chinese. It's ruined that balance. But again, I'm at odds with it. But going on, so you've got this strange contrast between these kind of high IQ, rich Chinese people and these working Indian people. And then you've got the contrast, the contrast is the Asians and the lower class kind of drug addicts. Like, you've just got these crazy fuckers running around screaming because they still think it's, it's early 2000s where this place wasn't, I guess gentrified, so to speak. They still think it's that, they're still getting their money, they're still getting their welfare money, they're still buying their drugs, and you've still got these people, and you can see that the children, the teenagers, the younger generation coming in are a little less fucked up. They're a little less genetically fucked up, as it kind of happens, but they've still got that streak of like lower class, lower genetics kind of look to them, but it's kind of improving, I guess. So you can see the change, and you think, ultimately, I guess it's a change for the better. But the problem is when real estate is worth, 600, 700, 800 for the cheapest, and you got to realize you're not paying that. You're paying, a million 200K, $1,300K over the course of that property's life because of all the interest. It's fucked. And then again, wages, they haven't gone up that much. Like, our wages are fairly comparable to America. If you exchange the currency over, we pretty much earn about as much as American, but our buying price buys you a quarter, a fifth of what, realistically you would get. Okay, so we've got this situation where pretty much everywhere is being gentrified because they want the Chinese to invest. They don't want, Chinese don't want to come to ghettos full of meth heads, which is what a lot of places in this country regretfully are, or working class kind of shitholes, factory districts where it stinks of smoke. It stinks of all kinds of factory fumes when you go out. They don't want to come to these shithole areas. For example, I had this situation where I was out working, a couple months ago, and I was at my local town, like not my town, but my suburban area, my local suburban area. And there was an Asian couple, probably around 40, 50 years old. And it was nighttime on a Friday, I think, and they were getting literally, like, the woman was getting beaten on by this drunk, could be on meth, I don't know, he looked Maori. I don't know, he looked kind of like middle toned skin, so not dark black, but like mild, like a very light brownish color. I don't know if he was, around like an islander person, or maybe even like a Middle Eastern person. I don't really know, or if he was New Zealand, like Maori or something. Looks something like that. And I was riding up and I see this in the distance. I'm like, fuck. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I stop my bike, and I get myself in the middle of the fight to stop, because at the end of the day, I doubt some 40, 50-year-old fucking Asian woman's causing trouble, getting herself to a fight with some 30-year-old looking, guy who's drunk on a Friday night. So I put myself in the fight, and I'm guarding their ass. And literally, I before I get to there, I see that guy fucking like beat the woman in her head. It's horrible. It's traumatic. Fucked me up after watching that. It really did. And I get there. That guy, he notices my because we're in a back and forth energetically. We're in a back and forth. It's like who's more afraid, or who's more willing to put into the fight. And eventually things, we hit like homeostasis, or a middle point. And he notices I'm not backing down, and he's got more to lose. Because there's another guy who's starting to come over. Another guy's starting to come over. So he backs off. And I'm watching these two Asian people, just making sure making sure the other guy's not coming back. And the woman saying, we have to get out of here, this is horrible. And I'm thinking back in my head, yes, I don't know why you came here. This is a shitty lower class neighborhood. Why the fuck do you, like I'm trying to be nice in my head. I'm trying to be nice, saying like, you really shouldn't be here. This is a shithole. This is an absolute shithole. Like, why are you here? And I think the same way when I'm at the local town. And if you go to the major city area, it's like, it feels like it's mostly just Chinese people and mostly just Indian people. And then it's like 10% white people, and maybe 10%, like maybe it's like half black, like half of that's like 5% of that's black people, 5% is I don't know, Middle Eastern or some other race or whatever, and then it's just 80% Indian, Chinese in the major city. So it's kind of inpouring from there. It's like the channels of veins, from the heart. It's reaching out to the arteries and reaching out to the veins, which are more the suburbs. So you've got this contrast between the lower class and the Asian people. They're coming to places. I don't think they understand that Australia's not a nice country. Australia isn't a country you come to. You leave it. That's the idea of Australia. You leave this place. You don't come here. But I guess because they think that it's like, oh, Australia, it's free, it's not like China. It's like, no, we're just as bad. It is just as bad, if not probably worse. At least China is systematized properly. This place is not. At least the corruption is systematized. It's out in the open, This place is, it's pretty much out in the open. The politicians are so fucking stupid, I guess, so put it that way. But anyway, that's what's happening here. Probably that is happening where I don't know, maybe Asian people are experiencing that, that kind of attack on them like I saw. I don't know. And eventually, more and more, as it gets more and more gentrified, as the suburbs start to get more and more gentrified, you will see more and more Asian people in the suburbs, be that Indian and Chinese. Now, the Indian people, the Indian country is a bit of a scam, as in there are scammers all around the place. So Indians are more, hardened, I guess, to bullshit. Meaning they probably are able to navigate the shittier lower income suburbs, because you see a lot more Indian people in the shittier areas, in the lower income working class areas, where you see more Chinese people in the cities, the richer areas, right? So anyway, that's kind of the situation. To summarize it, the governments are the ultimate problem. the Indian and the Chinese are not the problem, to summarize it. The governments are the problem because they are using the boomers, the boomer generation, as useful idiots. See, the boomers, yes, I mean, I do expect them to, take responsibility for what they've done. They've basically been useful idiots who've been, politically and financially manipulated into making this housing problem, having an immigrant issue, an immigrant and housing issue, to the point where the younger generation, now we can't get jobs and we can't get money, and our only option is to earn enough money to leave and to never come back to this shithole. So the government is the one at fault here. Really, that's, and then it's the boomers problem, and then it's kind of, the immigrants, and then it's, I guess, everyone else. But going on, the main problem is that the government is gentrifying the towns and then the suburbs, I imagine then the suburbs, in order to attract rich Chinese investment, and they are allowing excessive amounts of immigrants, to come into work. And then you get the Chinese owning all the houses in the towns and the cities, and then you get the Indians, owning all the jobs and some of the houses in the outer suburbs, the suburbs. And then you get, as I said, the younger Australians unable to buy anything because everything's so expensive. The house prices are ridiculously expensive. They're unable to get jobs, so it's a lot of stress, a lot of financial stress, to the point where the original Australians who were living here are just not, they're not having kids either because they can't financially. Where this place is becoming, even in the suburbs, I see sometimes more Indian and Chinese people than I do, white people or Western Australian people. Same way in the city, that's just normal. It's just normal to see more Chinese people than everyone else. It's just normal, it's just always been normal for me to see that. Just ever since like 10 years ago, that's just how it was. I've never seen it outside of that. So really, this country is just, it's become an Asian, I guess. And then I guess it's like the top is maybe you've got some really rich Australian people, but then the problem with them is their children are usually drug addicts and losers, and they don't continue it on. So again, it's just going to be Chinese and Indian people who move up into the upper ranks. So ironically enough, I kind of think to finish the video, the ironic part is I think once Chinese and Indians actually like literally take over this place at like the level of government and the highest levels, I think real estate prices will actually go down because they will realize, oh, we need people, it's like cattle, so to speak, to work and to reproduce and all this stuff. And whether they want their own people, because that's what, Chinese are very their own people. Maybe if you speak Chinese, you can get a good real estate deal through them. Because already there are Chinese like areas specifically where it's just full of basically Chinese people, Chinese businesses. It's all in Mandarin, like the Hanzi script. And I imagine the real estate there is actually kind of cheap if you are, you speak Chinese and you are Chinese racially. So, will they throw the white Western man a bone? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see. Either way, I will not bother because I will be gone from this poorly managed shithole country as soon as I can, really. But that's really what I see. So, hope you enjoyed. You got something from this. And you enjoyed. Maybe it's happening to your place, to your country, in a similar or different way. Again, due to poor government mismanagement. Hopefully it's not happening as bad. I think Australia is the worst example, just because Australians are too stupid to manage their own country. They're too greedy and such. So they the boomer Australians, they just They let into their greed and allowed all this to happen. And the politicians, they kind of commanded them like a puppet master, and or that's the situation we're in is because of that. So anyway, I'll leave it with that. Of course, feel free to check the links in the description, social, commercial things, and have a nice day. I've always thought that the amount of work you need to do is, if you think of, just say, how much work do you need to do to get something off the ground, to make something, to do something, it's probably 10 times more than that. So you times that amount by 10, and then the reality is that it's 10 times more than that. So it's about 100 times more work than you think, or 1,000 times more work than you probably think, chances are. That's the reality of how, finishing certain things, doing certain things, and gaining success works. Now, the good side, or the good part, is that once you've done something, it's not hard to do it again. If you've ever made a piece of furniture, which realistically is not a very hard thing to do, just say you've made a chair, a table, or a cabinet or something, once you've done it once, you have a vague idea of how to do it. You're not a master at making a chair once you've made one chair. Once you've made about 10 chairs, you're probably pretty darn good at it. You probably know what you're doing. It's not hard anymore, which is a good thing. That's the one good part about work, is that once you've done things enough, it's not that hard. Things do get easier. But if you don't know how hard things are, or how much work you have to do, you're going to suffer more. It's like, I remember this one time in high school, we went to some forested area and we had to walk. And the walk was very long, and I was not a very athletic or fit teenager, I'll put it that way. And I was struggling. Eventually, of course, you get to a point where it's a lot quicker to go forward than to go back, probably. Well, I didn't really know, but so you just kind of get in the zone of things, your adrenaline kicks in. But either way, if you don't know how long you have to do something, like I didn't know how long I had to walk that walk, so that kind of stressed me out and made me anxious, made me think, oh geez, how long is this really going to be? Am I going to be walking for hours? How long could this really be? It's like if you ever had to walk back to a town or something. You've been out in the suburbs and you've got to walk like 10, 20 kilometers or something. By the end of it, your feet are just in immense pain. If you don't know how long, if you don't have the map, if you don't know, if you haven't done something before, which is how you get the map of something, you don't know how long it's going to be, and it's going to make you anxious, and it's going to make any amount of work worse. So once you've done something once before, it's a lot easier. Or if you have some kind of teacher or mentor to say, hey, this is what you got to do these things, get them done, do this amount of work per day, and this is how much you have to do to get there, it's a lot easier. If you have to pioneer everything, it's pain until you just get good at that. But anyway, a good piece of advice is that if you're not getting the results you want, you're not doing enough work. Now, you have to be careful. You have to practice temperance. It's like tempering the flame, tempering, the left and the right side, tempering the fire. What that means is that if you do too much work, you burn yourself out, because eventually you get to a point where you just can't be bothered, where you resist working so much, and then you spend ages resting, because you got to rest, you got to let your mind rest and all that, and then you just rest and rest and rest, and you never really get back to doing what you need to do. Though, sadly, you have to be realistic. You have to learn to work, learn to force yourself to work, learn to really, really work and work and work and work and work. And buckle down, and it's too bad if you are tired or you don't want to do something, so you've got to get it done. Because if you want to get things done, if you want to do things in your life and achieve a lot of things, you need to do a lot of work. You can try to pay people to do things for you if you got the money, but then personally I like to do things because it's mine. I've made it. I achieved it. If I pay a bunch of people to make something for me, I couldn't really say it's mine. They did the work. See, the work for me is what is, it's the ownership of it. That is, that's the me part. The end result, just because you own a picture, you bought one, doesn't mean you did the work, so to speak. It's lovely if you like a picture and you buy it and all that. There's nothing wrong with that, but what kind of life do you want to live? Personally, I'm interested in being and having the ability to do things, do anything really. So you have to work. So I have to work. So really, the secret is work and finding the energy, and the energy isn't a stimulant. Don't be taking stimulants, and don't be forcing yourself unnaturally. The energy comes from relaxation, comes from easiness, comes from not having to listen to annoying neighbors or dogs or family or friends or people, or having to work a shitty job, or being stressed about bills and money and all this nonsense. It comes from not having to deal with that optimally, sleeping and resting and eating and taking a bath or something. So of course, try to get your life in order as much as possible. Get your house all cleaned up, your room cleaned, garden cleaned, pay your bills, cook your food, rest properly, do all that stuff so you don't have to worry about it. And then you can get your work done. And anyway, summarize. If you're not happy with where you are, you're gotta do more work. This is more, of course, related to men specifically, but I'm sure if you're a woman, you can take some advice from it. But yeah, if you want to get things done, you work more. If you want to get them done quicker, you work more. If you want to get more things done, you work more. You just have to get more work done. It gets quicker and easier as you go along. That's the annoying thing about life, is that things get really easy as you go along. Like things that are really hard. It's unfair. Life is unfair. It's a poorly set up game. But I guess that's kind of how every game works, is that games are hard in the beginning and then they become kind of easier. Of course, some games, they're hard. It's like Ninja Gaiden. If anyone's played like the Xbox 360 Ninja Gaiden, that can be really fucking hard. It doesn't really get easier. You just have to get stronger. And life is kind of like that. You just have to get stronger. But I don't know. Once you learn skills, they're easier. So it is what it is. Whatever. I'll stop complaining about life. Of course, check the links in the description if you're interested in social and commercial stuff. If you want to buy stuff or email me or whatever. And have a nice day. So I saw this Gab post, and I'll read it out. It's by someone called Brannon, and it starts: Western civilization depends on generations of hyper-competent white men who keep complex infrastructure systems running. Right now, these men are either 1. Retiring, 2. Getting fired for being white, 3. Not getting hired for being white, 4. Not getting into STEM programs for being white. The infrastructure you thought was reliable as the air you breathe will begin failing because of this. Now, this is a very interesting thing, because I think we are actually going to start seeing this, and probably we've already seen this. I think this is actually a part of what is happening. And to people who don't really understand race, the thing is, different races are fundamentally different. If you looked at different dog breeds, you would say, well, that dog's good for hunting. That dog is good as a pet. It's tiny, it's completely weak and defenseless. It's a good pet dog. Or maybe that dog's very smart. Now you can see in a dog, if it's intelligent, you can see there's a certain look in it. Any animal in general, actually, you just see that. The same thing is with humans, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that we are, different and that we have certain roles. Now, of course, the world is becoming more and more globalized, though it's more the West. For example, if you go to a country outside of the West, a non-white country, like a non-white, non-European, non-Western country, they will prioritize their own race for work, for marriage, for basically everything in that country. Because it's, it's standard for survival. It's kind of what you have to do. In a Western country or a European country, it's a bit different because they've been corrupted. Now we're getting to a point where things have swung so far on the opposite end that the racism is essentially directed towards the white man. Now, from a more practical standpoint, which is what we're talking about, this is a bad thing. It's bad because it's a pain in the ass, being a white man and being kind of discriminated. It is fundamentally a pain in the ass because of that. But I'm gonna, I'll try to bring it into a more logical, more, this is why it's bad for everyone point of view. The infrastructure, and that means the physical infrastructure, is in the buildings. It means, the banking systems, the social, the governmental systems, and it also means the digital infrastructure, meaning the servers, the websites, etc. A lot of these things in the modern world are built by, what would you think, white men. They are designed and built by, the white man, so to speak, because archetypally white men or European white men are very high in intelligence. The only race higher is Eastern Asians. Now, Eastern Asians and also Indians are kind of taking a sub-role in the development and upkeeping of the infrastructure. You can see, the Chinese with their development of science and such, or Indians with their development of computer technology and all of that. So they're taking a sub-role, but the people who pioneer things, the people who have that kind of intelligence for creation and pioneering is white men. It's just an innate thing. It's like if you look at a black man, they're just fundamentally better at most sports, at most athletics. It's just hardwired into their genetics. What happens if you have a society that requires athletics and sports and you just say to all the black men, oh no, you're not allowed to join, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do anything. It's like if we stopped mining resources in Africa, the world would have a resource crisis. Well, the same thing's happening to white men where, as I said, they're retiring or they're not being let into positions. If you're a white man right now, you're basically being forced to some kind of entrepreneurship or self-business, or, a lot of guys are really just sitting on the couch smoking weed because they can't get work or they don't think it's worth it. So, there's that. Now, what actually happens in infrastructure-wise is that things will start to fall back onto what has already been, as in they won't be pioneered as much, they won't be pioneered properly or a good way, and then eventually they will, the existing infrastructure crumbles. Now, we as a new generation essentially have to take responsibility for this infrastructure. We have to rise above, these issues. Because you're going to notice eventually, something stops working. Some system around you maybe stops working as well as it used to. A shop that you needed isn't there, and you're going to have to figure out new ways to deal with that, or figure out, a way to fix that infrastructure. Of course, if we just simply allowed white men back into the economy and society and stopped stigmatizing them, well, maybe things would work out a lot better, and maybe we wouldn't have to suffer this. But I think society and the world as a whole has to kind of learn that you can't do this stupid stuff. or else, well, things start to crumble, problems arise. Anyway, that's about it for this one. Of course, check the links in the description, and have a good day. So I guess I'm starting to notice the idea of status and such in socialization, and especially social media. Social media is the online version of socializing. And it's more the modern version, I guess. It's where people seem to focus quite a lot. Back in the day, it would be you would buy something to make you look rich, or you would look a certain way. People who always try to get their hair cut, always trying to wear fancy clothing, always trying to speak. Maybe they're speaking in a certain way to pretend that they live in like the upper city or something. Nowadays, it's a bit more in what you post. For example, like I'll use the example of a person who is possessed by status seeking. These people post nothing but images of their holidays and their cars and houses and watches and whatever other nonsense things that they use to status seek. And it's not always that they actually have these things. Maybe they rented them, or they're borrowing one. Who knows? Something like that. That's a much more physical, materialistic way to symbolize the status. And of course, you could do this through different means, like intellectually, for example. If you look at the social media service LinkedIn, which I always had a bad feeling about. I never wanted to. I remember it was kind of like you were advised to join it to get a job. I thought that was cringy, social media surrounding work, and it's a bit weird. But anyway, people will broadcast their work status by saying they have all these different certificates and they have all these different skills, and when you read them, it's basically just nonsense. They just jumbled a bunch of words together and tried to make something that sounds fancy and nice, really meaning nothing. Or they might pretend or lie that they have some kind of role. It's like on a resume. Some people, they try to lie about what work they've done in hopes of getting a job. Personally, I've never liked that, but I guess I've never had much luck with getting jobs. So yeah, I guess it kind of shows what the market wants. Either way, it's not a good thing, of course, because then you have people in positions who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. Yeah, well, that's about it, really. So on social media, let's say you have a value of status between 0 to 9. I like using 0 to 9. I've been thinking about it recently, instead of using 1 to 10, because technically 10 is a part of the teens, so I don't think we should use that. 0, assumably you have no status. 9 is like you rule a country or a giga corporation, you person that everyone knows and everyone worships or something like that. And 5 is your kind of you're in the middle. You have a decent status around your town, around your place. You can make waves. You can make things happen. Not to a huge extent, but you probably have a family, a community, and such. So it's pretty. 5's pretty decent, or 5 around 4, something like that. Going on, so you have a certain status level, and your of course it's social media status and external worldly status, like at your job or whatever. And certain things enhance this. Firstly, what you wear enhances it, how you present yourself, like your energy, your mannerisms, the way you speak, etc. Who knows you and who's, over time, of course, and what kind of achievements you've done, what you post on social media, how frequently you post, the amount of followers you have is one thing. High follower count means high status, low means low status. And what I notice is that people will subconsciously like you and revere you more if you have a higher status. And I think if you're a man, women are more interested in you. Like, let's say you have the status of 3. You can only attract women around 2 to 3 points lower than you, which would mean maybe you can attract women of status 0 or 1. Or you have status of 7 and you're trying to get a business deal with some big company, and the company also has a status of 7. They're probably not going to hire you because you don't have you're not kind of on their, well, you are on their level, but they want someone higher, they want someone better. If you try to work with a company that has a status of 5, maybe they'll work with you. You get what I'm saying? So if you want to attract and get deals or women or something or other, ideally you're going to have a higher status than these things. And because they're looking at your social media, they're talking to other people about you, they're looking at your resume, they're looking at your achievements, so to speak, and they're trying to get an idea of who this person is. Now, personally, I'm kind of a person who's immune to this, because this is the same. People who get locked into status are the same people that get locked into propaganda. All the people who get locked into advertising. See, advertising only works on a specific person, a specific type of person. Propaganda only works on a specific type of person. The idea of status only works on a specific type of person. Usually it's due to insecurity, for example. These people need a guide. They need to look elsewhere or out of themselves, and they need to look towards society to confirm and verify what is in front of them. Personally, I would rather just talk to a person or to, take things as they are, because usually men are not very good, specifically men are not very good at presenting an image. Women are much better at presenting an image. So when you look at a woman for status, you have to realize that she might be lower because she's better at taking pictures, she's better at wording things, she's better at presenting a nicer image, while a man potentially could be less intelligent at that, less developed at that. So you have to understand these things for what they are, and not exactly understand how to judge properly. But you can notice a man who's good at presenting for status, a man who tries to look like he is more than what he is. You have to learn to just see this as well, especially if you're going to work with people, because you might think you're working with someone who's very high up the ladder, but they're not. Similarly with a woman who is high up the ladder in her own ways, but she's not, potentially. Usually people who are into business and social media, the social areas, will have a better status than what they are, just because they know how to navigate these areas the same way that someone who's physically more orientated will have a better ability to make things or to generate resource or something, or an intellectual person will have a better way to program or to work with language or arts or science and such. So I believe as a man, the idea that the men slowly gain value is due to this status idea. It's because if you are 20 compared to 40, you're going to know a whole lot more when you're 40 than when you're 20, and you're going to be able to, or your status will present that. Again, the idea of the clothing, what you wear, how you present yourself, how you speak, your achievements, the people you know, etc. And then on social media, the kind of posts you make, the kind of videos, the kind of things you're showing you're doing, or the kind of businesses you have. These of a 40-year-old man is going to be a lot more proficient and a lot better quality and such than a 20-year-old man. So I believe that's where that comes from at least one major point. So you're going to get a lot more respect, of course, the higher status. And then, of course, the idea of women, the idea of men aging up and women aging down is that ultimately, if you are a woman who has a lot of achievements, no one's really going to care, because it's, unless their achievements around family or around, womanly things, for example, no one really cares if a woman's rich, or if she, I don't know, can build a house or something. It's not really an impressive thing for a woman, just talking about it in a realistic sense. So eventually I think there is a diminishing return for a high status of a woman, because again, the higher the status of a woman, just say if she is of a status of 7 out of 9, she's going to want a man who is a status of 9. Essentially, and there's not many men who are of status 9. You can think there's a lot more men of a lower status than of a higher status, because there can only be one president of or prime minister or ruler or CEO or leader or whatever high figure. There can only be one in a certain category, meaning in a certain country there's only going to be, let's say, 10 people maybe of a status 9. But there's going to be a decent handful, maybe 100 women of a status 7. So once you go beyond about 4 or 5 as a woman, I would say, there's diminishing returns, even above like 3. Because again, at the end of the day, if you're a woman of status 3 and you want a man of 4, 5 to 6, there's that's average. And average nowadays is the average of 50 years ago is more like the above average of today, at least if we look in terms of finance, in terms of practical, physical abilities and such, because inflation and negative wage growth and such, things like values like that. So I believe there's diminishing returns, but of course, as a man, ultimately status is a good thing. You get diminishing returns if you are lower status, because you're perceived as worthless, as not good for work, or as a husband. So it works in opposites, I believe, for men and women in this scenario. Anyway, that's it for this video. Of course, check the links in the description, and feel free to comment or check social commercial stuff and whatever. Goodbye.